quick reminder, each episode could contain some game spoilers, so please listen or watch with discretion. And now, your hosts for The Gamer's Advocate, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Gamer's Advocate, where we discuss all topics in games. You get 1,000 gamers in a room, you might get 1,000 different opinions, where we love to discuss games that we hate and games that we love to hate and hate to love. But today's topic is going to be about pets in video games. Everybody loves pets, and we like to see them in games, but I don't see the subject covered too often, and yet it's become more and more of a trend, I think, in many games where you do see pets in games, and hey, it doesn't hurt, and we all have pets of our own. I don't know, do you have any pets of your own, Com?
I have never had a pet in my life.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that strange?
Well, not even a fish?
I might have had a goldfish possibly when I was small. It doesn't ring any memories, but I can remember some
Not
friends
a good
having
sign
them.
If you can't remember if you've had a pet.
Yeah.
Well, what if you had a fish, what would you name it?
Farthead. It's a child's name for a child's pet.
There you go.
We did have one of my ex's dogs, which we used to call Diogi, spelled D-O-G. It was very clever. Yeah.
Okay.
That was the closest I came to having a pet. To be clear, that was not the dog's actual name, and it didn't respond.
Yeah. So it didn't live with you?
It spent more time on my couch than it probably was supposed to.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't technically live with me, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Banana, do you have any pets?
I do. Actually, Kiki is my first pet. So I didn't have any pets until I was in my 30s, and then I adopted a dog, and she is the most spoiled, pampered princess in existence. She has a little tiara for when we celebrate her birthday, and she gets a cake. It's completely over the top.
Wow.
You celebrate the birthday once a week.
Yeah, she doesn't know when her birthday is.
Slice for me, slice for you,
Yeah.
another slice for me.
Yeah, I eat Kiki's dog cake with her.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be chocolate. It could be vanilla.
Oh no, it is specifically a cake mix for dogs.
Oh, okay.
This is not some Fudgy the Whale going on.
No. We don't celebrate my dog's birthday by poisoning her.
Not a good idea. But it is interesting. You can always relate to why pets would be endearing in a art type atmosphere, right, Com?
Oh, I take the same approach with pets as I take with children. I love other people's pets. I love other people's kids. They're great. I just don't want my own.
There you go. I've always had pets. I can't tell you how many pets I've had over the years. Fish, birds. I haven't had any small mammals, but I do have Pomeranians. But I haven't had gerbils or hamsters or anything like that. I haven't had any snakes.
Haven't had any rodents.
Yeah.
I had a hamster.
Oh.
You've just reminded me. I had a hamster.
Was his name Boo? Was it Boo?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
his name was Hammy.
Oh. How cute.
Yeah, so Hammy the hamster.
Hammy the hamster.
Very clever.
Yeah, no, I was a smart kid.
Yeah.
Classic gifted child syndrome.
Very creative. Yeah. I like it.
I do appreciate that this was when you were a kid, because if we found out that you just remembered you had a hamster last week.
Yeah, I've got to go to the other room. Hold on, he's probably hungry.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a week. Now that I think about it.
I had a hamster on Friday.
Yeah. See, right now I have 3 Pomeranians and I have 3 cats, but none of them are mine. 2 of them are the kids, and then one has adopted my wife because she found him in the middle of the road, this size.
I was a very, very small kid.
Yeah, and she brought it home because they were off to do, my son was visiting from college, and they were off to do some kind of event or something. She's like, I gotta go, and here's this cat. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I had to give it a little bath and take care of it and stuff. And so anyway, it's still here. And his name is Garrus.
You nerd.
I didn't name him, but
Yeah, you're right. Hammy is a way better name.
but yeah, we've always had a lot. I've always had a lot of pets. But Ripley is one of my dogs that you'll see on some of my streams. She's always sleeping in her little GIF. So anyway, but that's kind of the story of us and our history of pets. So
I guess also if we can say that the cat adopted someone, I may accidentally have a cat.
no,
I don't do anything. I don't feed it. I don't play with it. I don't talk to it. But he sits out on my balcony on the back of the building and occasionally deposits parts of birds there.
yeah, that's your cat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the fact that you said you don't feed it or play with it suggests it's not your cat. You just exist on the same planet as cats.
But he keeps giving me parts of birds.
and it's your balcony, so that's your cat.
And it's my balcony.
Yeah.
Possession's 9/10, mother
Yeah,
flip up.
yeah. So what are you going to name this cat? Garrus is taken.
Catty.
Caddy and Hammy. Very good. You got a good trend there. I like it. You know, Banana, I think we talked a little bit before we started the stream, just very briefly. You had a good list of games that you listed off the top of your head of had pets in them. You want to go over maybe one or two?
Sure. So for me, the first one that popped into my head, maybe just because I have a dog, is Fable 2. So Fable 2, you are introduced to your character. You get this revelation that you're a hero, which just means you're very capable of something, and you kind of have to choose your direction. But you have a companion in your dog immediately. And as you are kind of going through the tutorial, you learn that your dog will help you discover various items buried beneath the ground as you play through. So there's immediately a mechanic that kind of provides value from having your pet. And of course, having a furry companion is pretty endearing on its own. But the combination of having, a cute animal companion who does, through some game mechanic, provide you with a means to advance your character or maybe get closer to whatever your in-game goal is it seems to be a pretty common element across video gaming as a way to introduce a pet and give them that added benefit that immediately makes you like them.
Yeah, and it kind of tells you a little bit about the person without telling anything about them. Are they good to their pet? Are they bad to their pet? Type thing. One game that it's going to be a loose tie to our subject, but Darkest Dungeon has, I think it's the Huntsman. Is that him? I don't like using the Huntsman because I don't want to ever lose with the dog, dying. So I don't ever use them. And so it's one of those like, he might be useful, but I don't like using him.
That is an all media cliche that I can't stand, is using the death of a pet as emotional manipulation. I think the biggest reason that I can't stand it is because it works every time. I see it coming and I know it's going to devastate me when it happens, and it still does.
Well, it's the emotional love equivalent of a jump scare. It works just on such a fundamental level that you almost can't oppose it.
Yeah. Also, Star Wars. I was playing that one fairly. I think you're still running through a Jedi Survivor game. I don't know if you've gotten this far yet, but you do get a little furball companion. I forget what they're called. That just ends up on the ship, and it's kind of a little interesting little detail. He just kind of like shows, because they're real cute animals on the starter planet, and then as you progress through the game, one of them decides to accompany you, and I don't know. It's just a neat little detail. It just adds to the overall vibe of the small ship that you're on. But
I think with things like Star Wars as well, that you open up this whole world where the pet doesn't need to be organic.
Mm-hmm.
You have
Yeah,
I can't remember the name of the droids from Jedi Survivor, so I'll let Banana take it. But you think of the classic Star Wars movies, or maybe not Banana. If you think of the
don't
classic Star
remember
Wars
that
movies with
droid's
R2-D2, R2-D2 is the cutest pet I've ever seen in my life. As well as that, I think it's BB-8.
BB-8, I believe, is the one from the most recent trilogy.
That one. again, not my favorite movies, but as a pet-like figure, wonderful figure.
Mhm.
Bunch of Star Wars nerds in here. So
Whatever,
BD1
dork.
is BD1
Mm,
the droid from Jedi Survivor?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, BD1.
And again,
Mhm.
BD1, cute and provides you with healing resources. So what's not to love immediately?
I think that can often be the sweet spot for a pet in a video game when it comes to them being on your side. So if I can quickly jump into the first one that jumped into my mind when I was thinking of this, it's from Final Fantasy 16, and it's the protagonist's pet dog, Torgal. Now, Torgal is on your side throughout the whole game. This is Torgal's thing. It's the unconditional love that you get with a pet. I think it meshes really well with the world. We mentioned Final Fantasy 16 before, and it's about as close as to a Game of Thrones game that Final Fantasy is ever going to become, except for maybe Tactics. And Final Fantasy 16, people die a lot. Family die, friends die, people betray, people disappear, powers and nations fall and crumble. Toggle's always there. Always. And unconditionally by your side. So it's this wonderful counterbalance to the theme, where all through the game, everything is being lost. Even the world is being lost. Slowly, shortly. Not Torgal. Torgal is always with you. And he supports you in combat, which of course is what we're really looking for. But he's quite aggressive. So Torgal, if I remember correctly, attacks a lot. There's a lot of biting of opponents. You can use him to help set up combos, things like that. But what I love and what will really endear a pet in a video game to me is if the pet is in battle as a support figure. So my health is getting a bit low and the pet throws a potion at me, my MP is a bit low, so it restores that. And anything it does in that way where it almost feels like it's your emotional support throughout the game, through the narrative, and it's your physical support during the battles. I think if you do that, you have me with your in-game pet.
Yeah, I think that is why the Palamute and Palico in Monster Hunter are kind of beloved figures because they provide support. I mean, your Palamute and Rise lets you navigate these large worlds faster, and that would be tedious without them. And your Palico throws healing stuff at you when you get in over your head. They're both immediately likable because they have their own mechanics to impact gameplay in your favor. And they're adorable.
That goes a long way, doesn't it? Just being adorable. It does so much. This is an odd one to think of in adorable because it's cute, but it's not traditionally cute. So if you think of traditionally cute, the Palico is a fantastic example. They are cartoony, they're sweet, they just look like you just want to smush them. You just want to give it a big hug and just squeeze it until it pops, like that kind of hug. I'm thinking of Metal Gear Solid 5 D-Dog. Now, DD is amazing in terms of in-game support. You get this really, really early in the game, your backup. It's almost like a husky or a, what are they called, Norwegian Elkhound, I think. And this dog's going to support you through the entire mission, the entire game. And what really DD does is picks out enemies, marks them on your screen for you, so that when you're walking around, if you can't see an enemy, DD's already flagged it, and now you can see this marker where the enemy's going to be. So immensely useful. But what I really love about DD is she's got an eye patch. It's absurd. And DD having that eye patch is the most endearing thing I've ever seen in my life. It's not traditionally cutesy. It's not colorful. But something about how unique that is gets me every time.
Isn't there a one of your games, Banana, the guy brush, where the pirate has the parrot has an eye patch?
That sounds right. I don't remember off the top of my head, having played through them relatively recently, but only once. It doesn't
I could
jump out.
I could be way wrong, but I know it comes from some game, and it's funny because it's a pirate parrot with an eye patch. So it's the same kind of like theme.
Yeah.
But this is that very human idea, isn't it, of placing human traits onto a creature. I've forgotten the word for that. Is it anthropomorph? I can't remember the word.
Anthropomorphizing.
That sounds exactly right.
Yeah.
So yeah, putting those very human features onto these onto these animals, onto these in-game characters, and it just really lets you bond with them. And when you think about what you like about people, is their individual traits, is those things that make them different. That's what makes people out to be your friends. Combine that with the almost unconditional love that you get from the dog or from the pet in question. It's the perfect formula. Perfect formula.
There's a series that I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but they have these little bird-like things. It's like choco nuts or something. I don't know what they're called. But do y'all know about Final Fantasy and some kind of birds that they got in them? Are those kind of considered pets, or
where you were going with? I don't know if you've heard of this game series before. I was like,
what could this possibly be?
Know exactly where this is going. Yeah, no, the chocobos are another great example. I feel like they might be a bit more divisive in terms of like what is cute, because I mean, I've seen an ostrich in real life. They are not cute, and that's more or less what a chocobo is. But the chocobo are presented as the cute version of that, and it works. But again, a big part of the appeal for chocobos is they're always helpful. Every game where you meet chocobos, they are either just fun or genuinely helpful, or both.
And they have a heaven. I've been told, chocobo heaven.
They have a paradise.
Paradise.
Okay.
Chocobos don't die. Shut up.
Make him stop.
Yeah. Although they definitely die in Final Fantasy X, and it is upsetting.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But I think Final Fantasy has another example that is just pure cuteness, and that is Moogles.
Moogles? Yeah.
Moogles are fucking adorable. And I don't know that you ever really have one as a pet. I mean, sort of.
I'm thinking of Chocomog Summon in 7, maybe.
Yeah, in 7 you have a summon. You don't really keep them as a pet. I'm gonna get the pronunciation of her name wrong, but in Final Fantasy 9 there's a character I always refer to as Eco. She has a partner. She has Mog, who was born on the same day she was, and turns out to be kind of, again, a Guardian Force, an Aeon, and Eidolon, whatever they're called in that variation of Final Fantasy. But that is the closest you get, I think, to having a Moogle as a pet. But they're just fucking adorable. And they are the save system in Final Fantasy IX. So they are, again, providing you with a vital mechanic to get through that game. Because if you can get through that game in one sitting, you probably haven't eaten in a couple of days. Go take care of yourself.
You should probably go check on your real life pets.
Yeah.
I would actually sort of piggyback on that, because my first Final Fantasy was 7. And you can largely go through 7 without noticing Moogles. So I didn't really realize what a part of the Final Fantasy world Moogles actually are. 8, fairly similar. You don't really need to run into any Moogles, or do you? Nothing's jumping out at me.
I don't think so.
But then 9, they become inherent. They are absolutely everywhere because you need them, and they function as a save point. And that for me was then my introduction to this character. And from that point on, then you start seeing them everywhere throughout the entire library of these Final Fantasy titles. And they are just perfectly done. They're almost the epitome of like a claw machine cute. Mm-hmm. It is the perfect shape to be put in just one of those claw vending machines to be able to pick it out. And it is masterfully done. I don't think we asked you, Legion, because you jumped in and you said you had a sort of tenuous example. Do you have an example of an in-game pet that just jumps out to you immediately as the one that you think of, where mine was Torgal?
Well, you actually brought up one that I kind of agree with before we started the podcast. Just we were talking very briefly about some things, but you brought up the Mabari in Dragon Age. I think that's kind of a unique example because it's a squad mate. It's a companion in a environment that you need someone to be a war dog, but they actually have... Not that the dog has dialogue, but there are moments of dialogue with your other companions like Alistair and stuff or Morgan, where they're interacting with the dog and the dog's just being a dog. But when you take the dog with you, you need them to be what they were bred to be. And there's actually a mod that a lot of people download, people that don't normally download mods. There's a mod for Dragon Age Origins that automatically includes the Mabari every time as a squad mate. So, I don't know, I thought that was a good
There
example.
are a ton of mods around the presentation of that character as well, to kind of customize them to make them look like your dog or something along those lines, to get a different version of the Mabari Hound that looks more like dogs we're familiar with.
That's really interesting.
I think that's just showcasing how beloved pets in video games are, that people want to kind of make that pet a bit more real for themselves.
Well, even speaking as someone who doesn't own pets, that is one of the 2 essential mods that I always have if I play Dragon Age Origins. It's Skip the Fade, for obvious reasons, and Ever-Present Mubari, or whatever the actual mod is called. And I wanted to dive into a question which I think is worth thinking about. Does it matter how realistic the pet is in the game for you to really build an attachment to it? And this could be in behavior, this could be graphics.
So there's a high, Subnautica, right? So Subnautica has, I think it's a squid-like character. It's not even like an actual character we could say has a one-to-one relationship, but it's your friend, it's your pal, it's your buddy that hangs out with you and is doing stuff while you're in that area. And I don't know, like I said, it's a pet, but it lives out in the ocean, so it's not really anything that's contained or anything. But so it's kind of hard to like pinpoint that, because I think that as an extreme example still works.
I think the Star Wars example kind of proves that it doesn't have to be realistic, because BD1 is adorable.
Yes.
BD1 is super helpful. I've never had a robot pet before. I don't think I'll ever have a robot pet that I'll think of in a genuine sense as a pet. But BD1 is great. And I think on the other end of that spectrum, you have Horus from Assassin's Creed Origins.
Yeah.
That's a very realistic pet.
Yeah.
I don't really care about them. I mean, I know I should, but the biggest draw for Horus for me was how useful they are. Yeah. They weren't really a beloved pet for me. I didn't connect with them, but I did really appreciate the benefit in terms of gameplay that they provided. But again, that's the other end, the hyper-realism that didn't draw me in more.
Do you feel, on the same sort of subject, that the addition of pets in video games, do you think that's something that it's easier for it to build a stronger connection now because of how realistic we can make them look? So I'm thinking of graphical fidelity now. If you think to pets in games from the 90s, pets, if you imagine Final Fantasy VII, the dogs that you see in the street, which are just sort of like 10 or 12 little puffed up spheres attached to each other. And then you compare that with Torgal from Final Fantasy 16, or any of the dogs you find in Red Dead Redemption 2, for example. Do you think it really helps that we can make them so much more realistic now? Or do we not even need that?
I don't think it does. I think if I found one of those dogs in Final Fantasy VII and there was a game mechanic that allowed me to adopt that dog and bring it along with me, I would be ecstatic. I genuinely don't think the graphical representation is integral to my enjoyment of a pet. I think it's really about kind of the pet's personality. And I think for me, a lot of it is the kind of unabashed joy of having a pet that's always excited to see you. I feel like if you include that element, I'm not even really going to care what the pet is, what it really looks like. If it is always on board, always super excited, always supporting me, I'm going to be a fan immediately.
So for you, the graphics really wouldn't matter. The narcissism would.
Yeah.
That's very important, but the graphics
I don't know
not so
if
much.
it's narcissism as much as the belief that no matter how bad I suck at this game, I will always have a friend.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean,
that's beautiful.
I really think that has to come down to gameplay. So, I mean, if you take something like, I'll go left field here, but you take something like Inscription, who those little, like the little animals that you have in the cards, they're not your pets, but they're endearing enough that you don't, because they even like have these like little things at the bottom and says, I don't want to go. Don't send me. I'm not ready. And if you haven't played the game, it's really hard to relate, but yeah, they do have like the little endearing qualities about them. But there's no real graphics there at all. It's just pixelated cards. So
how important is sound design for a cute pet? Because I think for me, that might be right up there as one of the most important things. I'm thinking, oddly enough, of those original dogs in Final Fantasy VII. They don't do anything. All they do is move around, again, as these just lumpy spheres. That's all they are. And they occasionally make this sound if you try and pet them. That's all.
There's the dog when you meet Priscilla in Final Fantasy VII in the slums of Junon. When the boss appears, there is a dog that runs to her defense and barks at it. And
Yes.
you hear an actual dog bark. And I think that is the kind of moment that made me realize what you're talking about is I like that dog more. It has that personality of wanting to protect Priscilla, and it's a dog. I heard it bark. That's what dogs do. I think, yeah, sound design does play a part. I don't know if it's enormous, but I do think in that one example, that is a big part of why I enjoy that there is a dog there.
I think this
it
is
much
maybe
more
where
realistically captures what a dog would do in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. Capturing the dog and making it very real. I think this sums up actually, well, or this really explains that it's not one part of the pet in the game. It's not the graphics. It's not just the personality. It's not just the sound design. It's not just the visual design. It's the whole spectrum, putting them all together, and add to that our basic human instinct for these pets and pet-like figures. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to our standard advice that we always give as well. If you do it well,
right,
then you do it well.
There's another game series that you guys may not be aware of, but specifically in Mass Effect 3.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, y'all may have heard of it.
I haven't played it.
There is, you have your space hamster Boo, was popular even before Mass Effect, through Baldur's Gate. And a beloved character named Misc had a space hamster in it. That's a D&D thing. And BioWare just kind of like transplanted that popular little character to our space hamster that we could have in our cabin. We also have fish. And I can't tell you how many times I've done a stream and says, how many fish are you going to, what fish are you going to get? How come you have no fish? Okay. But people like the fish. And then there's
I feel like an outlier on that one.
Yeah.
I've never used the fish.
At all.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
I feel like the fact that they could die was just the only thing I remember about them, and it made me not want fish.
Right. But in 3, you can buy the filter that requires no maintenance at that point. So you can stock it full of fish and none of them die.
I feel like that was my reaction, because I believe they're in Mass Effect 2 as well.
The filter?
Yes, I think so.
I don't think so.
No, just the fish.
Yeah, the fish. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they can die
in
Mass Effect. And I just remember thinking, we're living in the future. Why is there not something that prevents my fish from dying?
My friend in real life has a fish feeder that's automated. This is a thing. We don't need the future.
It's called Kelly. That's your fish feeder.
Yeah, but that's not the future. Kelly exists right now.
But also there's the mech dog in 3. And all he does is wander the cargo hold. And everybody loves him. And so going back to what you were saying with the sound design, the graphic fidelity, and the game design, none of them meet that criteria of being an exceptional pet. And yet they're pretty well beloved.
Yeah, I don't fit in everyone. I'm not a fan. It doesn't do anything for me.
I feel like that is something that was kind of added as fan service, but it's not as a beloved character as the companions are.
No.
It was just
Yeah.
like a nice addition, but I don't think of that dog in Mass Effect or the fish in Mass Effect as beloved pets in a video game series. I feel like they are pets in a beloved video game series, and that's a little
Perfect.
different.
Well, I can tell you until Legion just mentioned it, I forgot about that dog. But I've never forgotten about the Mabari. I've never forgotten Torgal. I've never forgotten the dogs and the horses in Red Dead.
Well, there is definitely an association because we don't really associate anything in that game with those characters. It's just they're there, right? But they are part of the environment is more immersive for us. And so without them, it's just that less immersive. But how much of that is to each person's point of view on that? It could be 1%, it could be 10%, who knows? But the fact is, it does add to it, and I don't think it takes anything away.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't say it doesn't, and I don't begrudge
Oh,
its
yeah.
presence. I
Yeah,
just have no attachment to it.
I think that is one of the examples of where not having a gameplay element kind of leads you to not care. Because
Yeah.
The mechanical dog in the shuttle bay is cute. Your space hamster is cute. But the fact that they're optional and don't really play a role in anything makes them a bit forgettable. And there's a game that I've sunk a lot of time into, Disney Dreamlight Valley. And you get a pet companion, and it's just a cosmetic. You can pet them, and that is it. Unfortunately, they also introduced, as a result of these companions, a game-breaking bug where your companion might exist underneath the floor of the room that you're in, and it just causes this memory leak that causes your game to shut down, essentially.
Oh.
So it is one of those examples of our advice not being followed, where they did something, but they didn't do it well, and it ruined the experience for some people.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's kind of the issue, is that if you're going to add this, make sure it benefits the player, or they're not really going to care. Because I mean, I'm a completionist, and that is a game about collecting cosmetics. So I have a lot of cosmetics for my pet. I don't particularly care about my pet. They're an accessory. And that's not how you should view a pet.
Yeah.
They are not decoration.
They're not quite the same, but MMOs incorporate a lot of pets a lot of times. And a game like WoW, where you have mounts of various kinds, a lot of them are animals, and they're not really your pet. They do have pets in that game, but I don't know. I could argue that that's that utilitarian, just like your Assassin's Creed example. But they want to collect it because it is it's not just a mount. It's kind of like a pet to them. I know in Star Wars, The Old Republic, I keep coming back to that game. There's just a whole series of pets. They're droids, but they're like little baby banthas. I mean, they're cute. So it's nice to have those little things.
While we were on the subject of WoW, I feel like the mounts in WoW are the equivalent of what I've always referred to as Scooty Puff Jr. in Destiny. So in Destiny, you get what's called a sparrow, which is a hover bike, essentially. And there's a lot of effort to get cosmetics for your hover bike. I feel like that's what WoW is. It's just a way to get around the world faster, and you want to collect all of these cosmetics so that you can customize your ride. I don't know that you're attached to Scooty Puff Jr. or your mounts. I think you just want the version that suits you.
I was going to stay on the subject of mounts actually, but switching games. I was going to reference two, and the first one was going to be Red Dead Redemption 2. Now that is a game where you really bond with your animal. Have you two played that game?
I've not played Red Dead 2.
Please do.
One, though.
So you will spend your time bonding with this horse, and over the game you can choose to make upgrades. You can choose to replace the horse. I generally didn't. I tended to find I was very happy with my horse, and I almost felt like it was a member of my party. It was a member of the gang, so I couldn't bring myself to replace it. So you already see there the way that you build an attachment. you can do lots of semi-necessary activities. Like you can brush the horse's mane, you can lead the horse by hand if you need to take it somewhere, you can hitch it when you go into bars and saloons. You don't really need to do any of this. It'll be fine if you don't, but you can. And I'd find myself sometimes just brushing the horse, just because I felt like I should, because it's my horse. So I've got to make sure that, she's feeling tip-top. Your character will talk to the horse. You give the horse a name. You keep the name. Should you lose that horse because they can die, it's gut-wrenching. Absolutely gut-wrenching. I never had the same feeling with Roach in The Witcher 3. And I think they use their storytelling, the way that you interact with these horses, to show the difference between Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2 and his relationship with his horse, which is, it's a friend, it's a family member, and Geralt's relationship with their horse. You can't really do anything for Roach. But then you look at the name and you realize that this horse isn't a friend to Geralt. It's just another horse called Roach. It's just the one that happens to be alive in this very moment. I always find that interesting now, the idea that through game mechanics and the way the character talks to them and the way that you can name in the one game and you can't in the other, the game designers instilled in me the exact relationship with the horses the characters are supposed to have. I care about Arthur's horse. I don't really care about Geralt's.
Well, can I ask, did you name the horse Horsey?
No, there was no S in the middle.
I'm glad you brought up The Witcher, because I was actually going to reply to that. What did you think about Roach in The Witcher? I think the big difference though is the gameplay, because we know about the humanity and the suffering and the day-to-day trials that Arthur Morgan has to go through. And Geralt, on the other hand, he's got supernatural abilities, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers big time when I'm making these comments, but it's real hard. But there are certain things about that story that are going to happen a certain way. So you're really focused on Geralt and his issues, not so much his travels and stuff. In fact, the more traveling you do, it seems like it breaks away from the immersion, because your job is to get Ciri and to find her. And so you're doing, let me go to this side quest over here. Let me go to this cavern nobody's ever heard of. I might have. None of that would probably happen if we were playing The Witcher in reality. Whereas Red Dead Redemption 2, there's consequences for every decision you make. And so having a horse that has those natural consequences for things kind of makes sense. And they didn't have to include it, like you said, but I'm kind of glad they did. It only adds to the immersion.
You guys have reminded me of an example where I think the gameplay is the most important element in terms of developing a pet. I was thinking about Shadow of the Colossus. In Shadow of the Colossus, there's not really a lot of explanation about anything. So I don't know that you even ever learn your horse's real name. You just kind of... I think the general consensus is that people have called that horse what the character sounds like they're saying whenever they call their horse, which is aggro. And I don't know if that's actually the horse's name. I think that's I just accepted it because that's the only thing you ever say to that horse. But and this is just fair warning for all of our listeners, this is going to involve spoilers for Shadow of the Colossus. So if you have not played, don't listen to me. But you play through that game.
If you were before.
Yeah. I don't listen to me is generally good advice, but in this specific instance, there's a reason. So in Shadow of the Colossus, you're overwhelmingly alone. You show up, you have your partner, and she is dead-ish. I think the conclusion is she's either tremendously ill or she is dead. And the only other living being that you are aware of is Aggro, your horse. And you go on this adventure and you have to race around a very large area to find each of these Colossus bosses. And Aggro is your means of getting there in a timely manner. Without aggro, that is a very boring game. And then as you approach the final Colossus, aggro falls off a bridge. And it is heartbreaking. It is so upsetting. And it is so almost predictable that it happens that you see it coming and it's still heartbreaking because of how important aggro was for your adventure up to that point. There's some times where you cannot beat up a Colossus without using aggro in combat. And now aggro is gone and you have to face the last Colossus alone. And it's intimidating. And the fact that you're alone makes it that much more intimidating. And there's really no development beyond aggro is your only friend who's not dead. And they were extremely useful. So I feel like that gameplay element of just having a partner and having a partner that makes navigating the world in this case better, or just some gameplay element removing the tedium from it. I think that's all it takes to make a beloved pet. And there are, I think there are examples that we've talked about where that gameplay element doesn't exist, and it kind of showcases why that pet doesn't become beloved.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask, though. Since some of those examples, I mean, I know some of the games that y'all mentioned and some of the ones I mentioned, it's like they'll live or die based on if that pet is in that game. Like that's one of the first things they make sure is in their environment.
Absolutely.
You know, so
there is a website, I believe it's just called "Can I Pet That Dog?" that is reviews video games to tell whether or not you can pet the dog in the game. So I totally believe there are some people where that pet is their focus.
So that's a really good example of, because I was thinking in my head, like, it's the same subject, you know, a horse that you're using for transportation. And that's basically it. That's the meat and potatoes of what it's doing. But you have The Witcher, you have the Shadows of the Colossus, and you have Red Dead Redemption. And then you have a game like Elden Ring. What's his name? Terrence?
Torrent.
Close. Yeah.
You have a lot of people who absolutely love, of course, Elden Ring. And they love Terrence. Torrent. Sorry. But anyway, they love him. But how much of that is because they just love the game and the gameplay, not necessarily, you know, the pet. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, like I said, it's adding to the immersion, or it's adding to the game, I guess. It's not taking anything away. But I don't necessarily know if that just adding more immersion like Red Dead Redemption necessarily, and it's more beloved. I think it works better for sure. It definitely something that you remember, but I don't think a lot of people would say, oh, I can't see Elden Ring without that horse, because they probably couldn't, you know?
Oh, no. As somebody who fucked up and didn't get Torrent when you're supposed to, that game sucks without Torrent. It's brutal. Torrent is your means for not dealing with tedious bullshit in Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Torrent is how you race past enemies you don't want to deal with to get to the enemies you actually care about. And having gone back to that point where you get Torrent, it's also where you meet the means of leveling up. And it might be forgotten for a lot of players, but in that conversation, she tells you that Torrent believed in you before she did. So immediately you're presented with Torrent is your friend. They are tremendously useful for navigating the game. They will keep you alive because you won't have to fight everything, which, by the way, sucked ass when I didn't have Torrent. But they also believed in you when you didn't know anything about them. You didn't even know Torrent existed, and Torrent chooses to become your ally because they saw potential in you. So I feel like Torrent is an example of a character that makes that game bearable, because without Torrent, that game is rough. But there is that little bit of development to say that Torrent has a personality, Torrent has their own desire, and they want to see you succeed. So I feel like Elden Ring without Torrent doesn't work.
Do we need to consider what I think we've actually managed to hit by looking at these different characters? So, Colossus, Elden Ring, Red Dead Redemption, they deal with the horse in very different ways. In Red Dead, you're making a friend. Really, you are making a friend, a companion who's going to be with you the entire time. In Shadow of the Colossus, you're sort of imposing a friendship upon this creature because you're alone. It's not a genuine friendship, it's a desperation. It's Tom Hanks in Castaway with the...
I was just about to say, it's Wilson.
It's Wilson, there we go, thank you, I can remember his name. His name, it's fucking Paul. And then you've got Elden Ring, where you don't really get the character that you get from a Red Dead Redemption horse, so you don't get to brush its mane or anything like that. You've got a bit of friendship directly from it being transmitted towards you via the dialogue that Banana just mentioned, where you're told the Torrent believed in you. And you have wonderful gameplay mechanics. So in this case, you've got the double jump, for example. And I think it's done what we mentioned earlier. It's not one thing about these pets that will make you love them. It's not just the unconditional love. It's not exclusively the gameplay mechanics. It's not exclusively the way you can interact. It's a sum total of all of these different things and how they add up. And for Torrent, he just manages to hit enough of these that it doesn't matter that you can't pet. It doesn't matter that you can't talk to Torrent in a way that you can to your horse in Red Dead Redemption, for example, which happens to not be able to double jump.
Yeah, and the one you didn't mention, of course, was The Witcher. But The Witcher does something fairly unique because this is Roach, regardless of which Roach we're talking about, because Geralt's gone through several Roaches. But we're able to kind of do, which I've referred to in other podcasts, is like the mind's eye. So as graphically, as beautiful as The Witcher 3 is, and all the little details that are going on in it, they don't really make a point to characterize Roach, but he is highly characterized. I mean, the mind's eye projects what Roach is like. I mean, he's in cyberpunk. Well, it's still CD Projekt Red, but he's jumping over things and he's got this little personality. So, and it's not really out of theme either, because a lot of people, because he's part of a meme, because he's in like certain positions and things, just graphical bugs and whatnot. But I think he is given a personality through the character, and that is what actually creates the endearing part of it, because they don't have to go all out in the immersion side of things. They just let the actual player develop that, and they remember him not just because he was a companion with Geralt, but we kind of like create that personality.
Well, yeah, you do tend to fill in the blanks. You're only given X amount of information about the horse, about these characters in the game, and then naturally you go and fill in the blanks. And especially for something as fundamental as Roach's character, something that big and important, what is this horse actually like? You naturally start filling in the blanks. Like, I always imagine Roach is this very powerful, fast, but clumsy horse. I always imagine Roach is clumsy. I think probably because of these glitches, where all of a sudden he's up on the roof, all of a sudden he's in the lake, wherever he might be. So yeah, you fill in the gaps and you create a character that isn't actually there, but you've been left the space to do so.
Yeah, one game that I thought, as far as pets go, that kind of went all out was Baldur's Gate 3. They have a couple of pets that you can keep at camp, and they can actually be playable in your squad. You can summon them, and they can actually make a difference in a if you do your spell rotation right, can one-shot things that would normally take you 20 minutes for an encounter, 20-30 minutes. I mean, trying again not to give any spoilers, but there's a section in the Underdark, and there's the adamantine golem. Is it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have an owlbear, and owlbears are big by nature, and this one is kind of like a baby, but you can cast enlarge, and it makes them really big, and they won't take the fall damage. So you can actually have them up real high, drop them down on the golem, one-shot that golem that would normally take your entire party like 20, 25, 30 minutes of mechanics to get that done. And my point here is that, and that's just a pet. That's all it really is just a pet and he has conversations with you. He says, "Oh, I'm so hungry," and this and that. So they went all out on the whole pet thing. because you don't have to have them around. It's just, you could just have them just be there, you know. But the fact that you can actually include them in party mechanics too, it adds a whole little extra layer of dimension for pets. But plus Scratch.
Yeah, I think BG3 is the example that I feel like I know it's not what Com was talking about, but it's the example that fulfills all the stuff that Com was talking about, where you're introduced to the owlbear, and depending on how you go about recruiting it, it's immediately endearing because you're introduced to a baby owlbear cub that needs help. And you step in, you provide that help, and it joins you. And it's a bit tentative at first, so you have to earn its respect and earn its loyalty. And then it becomes part of your team, and it's very cute the entire time. And then it becomes very useful in combat like that, particularly with that adamantine golem fight, because that is a very pain in the ass fight without the owlbear. Especially if you're going for the achievement in the game, which is to not use the hammer. So that fight becomes even more difficult for that achievement. But if you have an owlbear that can one-shot it, maybe not so much.
Yeah. And Scratch is similar because when you find him, he is being a dog. You know, he is with his master who has passed away, and he believes that he'll get better, maybe. He has to believe that he might. And so you offer him, hey, look, you can come to our camp. He's like, I appreciate it, but I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to see. So it's not one of those situations where the writer said, oh, okay, yeah, this is a better deal for me. Let me just go. There's, it's thinking like a dog, So, but like I said, they went all out when it came to the pet stuff.
Hi, Kiki.
That couldn't have been more appropriate.
I feel like we're gonna get off of video games with this example, but I feel like it is the perfect example of the role that pets play in media. It's Seymour in Futurama. Everyone I know who is familiar with Futurama knows about that fucking dog episode, and that is exactly how they refer to it, because Seymour is the Hachiko story. It's the story of a real dog. A dog, I believe, in Japan, who was adopted by a businessman. And every day when the businessman went to work, the dog would go to the train station, see him off, and wait for him to come back. And one day he didn't come back. And the dog never broke away from that tradition. It was kind of adopted by the community. It was let at that train station. It was allowed to keep its tradition. It's a heartbreaking story. But it's so very much why we love dogs that I feel like it serves as the kind of archetypical example of what you can do with a pet in a game, is to say you have this permanent cheerleader, and they might not know what's going on, but they're always on your side. And even if you fail, they're still believing in you. I feel like nobody really does it better than that story. And the fact that Futurama has 8 seasons, I think if you separate the movies as season 7, which is kind of how they do it, in 8 seasons, maybe even more at this point, everyone knows that fucking dog episode. I don't think there's another episode of Futurama that I can just call out and everyone will know what I'm talking about. But that episode, everybody knows.
One I definitely wanted to try to remember was the Blair Witch, which you wouldn't think like pets in a horror game or something, but actually you see it actually more often than not. Here and there, you don't see like abuse or anything. I'm just saying you sometimes will see it in just to humanize your character because you don't have anything else much to go on in those type of games. But in Blair Witch, it's actually a mechanic. You're using the dog to find the clues that you need to advance the story. So it's actually a really unique mechanic that I haven't really seen much anywhere. And And but yeah, I just want to bring that one out because it was so uniquely done, and I'm surprised I just don't see it more often.
Yeah, I feel like that is the more extreme version of the dog from Fable 2 for me. Because in the story of Fable 2, I think there's one part, and I think it's during kind of that tutorial, where the dog finds a key item that you need to progress. And then after that, I think it's all optional. But it is that kind of showcase of the dog being your guide and a useful companion, a helpful ally. In the Blair Witch, I feel like it's much more you can't proceed at all without the help of your pet.
I was going to drag us somewhere else because I'm curious because I can't think of any. Can you think of any examples of truly bad pets in video games? Ones that you just don't want around? Because oddly enough, in my head, the only thing I could think of was Jacob from Mass Effect 2, which is not quite what we're looking for.
First time you remember his name.
Oh, he meant James. He said
Yeah.
Jacob.
Yeah, for sure.
Javik? We're talking about Javik?
Oh, I know. I wouldn't forget him. So, I've been trying to just think of bad ones for the last few minutes, and I'm finding it really hard to think of bad pets. I'm finding it quite easy to think of pets I don't care that much about. Things like in Mass Effect, the robot dog, for example. I just don't really care. It's there, it's not. Such is life. But pets that I actively think, oh, this game would be better without you. Can you think of any?
Nothing comes to mind. The only thing I can think of is that bug in Disney Dreamlight Valley. If the introduction of a pet means that the game could break, maybe don't put it in. But beyond that, I can't think of any example of a pet that made the experience worse.
I mean, I would answer just no for now until I can think about it, but
I did just think of one, but it's falling very much into the banana field where it's not inherently in and of itself bad.
Are you,
but so much of what it does is bad, just like
am I
banana.
supposed to interpret that?
So the way that banana was mentioning the pet in Disney Dreamlight Valley, it's not inherently bad, but the execution and the fact that it can occasionally lead to glitches and bugs, etc., can make your gameplay experience worse. There's a game that came out about 10 years ago called The Last Guardian. I remember that the big bird dog thing in that Trico, I believe, had so much right, but it had the same problem where occasionally the AI didn't quite work in your favor, where it got buggy, it got glitchy, and because it was essential to complete the game was to work with this pet, was for you to share the load, to share the labor. As soon as something went wrong, it was essentially fundamentally game breaking. The actual creature I thought was beautiful, really beautiful, and I loved it, but it suffered from the execution problem.
I'm gonna take a quick look because for some reason I associate that game with Shadow of the Colossus, but I might be.
I think it's the same company.
I think it is. So that is the game I was thinking of. I believe that is in the same universe. I think they are. I think they're sort of a sequel. I think The Last Guardian might be a prequel. Or Eco might be a prequel. But I feel like there is a direct connection between Shadow of the Colossus and Last Guardian. And thinking like this is a very oddly shaped pet that is weirdly still cute despite being substantially larger than you, which is typically not the direction that they go if you want to make something cute. And a very kind of sweet, timid personality shown when you're first introduced to it, because it's a caged animal when you first meet it. And it's showing that kind of reluctance, but gradual acceptance and then trust. And I feel like that is a surefire way to establish a connection. And then I feel like that just makes the gameplay issues more disappointing because you had all of the other build up in place to make this like a beloved character, and then the gameplay fell apart, and now I'm frustrated, and the symbol of my
Yes.
frustration is the pet.
Yes, and it's entirely on the pet in that moment. You're not thinking, oh, the AI, oh, the developers.
Yeah.
It's just you
Yeah,
stupid
when you
idiots.
bring the pet to life, it takes on a new kind of existence. And
Yeah.
now issues that I have with the coding behind the life form you've created are now that life form's responsibility.
When you were describing that, one came to me. Duck Hunt. The dog.
Oh, the dog.
Because I can't tell you how many times me and anybody else I've ever known, when you miss, you wanted to shoot that dog because he's making fun of you, and you're like,
Yeah.
not that you wanted to shoot the dog, obviously, but you just wanted to take out your
Oh, but you
frustration.
did.
Calm went
But
there.
I feel like I don't know that made the gameplay work. I don't know that made the gameplay worse. It just made you really not want to miss.
Well, like to Com's question is like, is there a animal out there that you didn't like? Right? You didn't like the
Well,
dog.
it's a broad question.
There are
is it?
animals that you don't like, but I feel like Com's question was more, was there an animal, a pet that was introduced that made the game worse?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm looking for essentially a failure. That's what I'm looking for. Because that's a conscious effort to make you hate the little bugger.
Oh yeah. That dog did exactly what they wanted that dog to do.
It's still to the same point because they've deliberately made it so he's infuriating. But the initial approach to it was more, was there something where a mistake in development, where a misjudgment was made, and you dislike the dog or the cat in spite of what they wanted you to feel. Whereas in this case, it's very much, no, we're going to make this guy an annoying little goober to encourage you to put more coins in or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I've brought up before, and this is, you got to play this game, Com. But Nier Automata does a really crazy thing where you have these androids that take on pets. So if you're looking for a more classic example of how pets in games can humanize your character or your situation, that game is specifically trying to do that philosophical point of view of what is humanity, what is intelligence, and things like that. And they're basically not the androids, the robots. They basically take on pets. It's pretty interesting. So
You say I've got to play it. In that moment, I just looked at my Steam library. I have played 0.5 hours of video games these past 2 weeks. That's 2 rounds of Apex and desperately trying to connect to an Apex lobby. I don't know when this is going to happen.
I am banned permanently from Apex, so I can't help you.
It's all
feel
right.
like-
I can happily self-ban myself from it.
Legion and I have those weird stories. Legion is permanently banned from Apex, having never played Apex. I'm permanently banned from Elden Ring's servers before I even played Elden Ring. I logged on in my first attempt to play the game. They were like, you can't.
You stop that
But
right.
with
then.
the seamless co-op mod, I can play with people, which is, I mean, kind of all I really wanted anyway. So,
And it is the better way to play with other people as well.
mhm.
But no, thank you. So that was really my concern is bad execution of pets in video games. I find it interesting that we couldn't think of that many.
Yeah. I think there's real simple uses of them, like Diablo 4. There's a few other games where you can now acquire a pet that all you really do is you pet them. But you could always in Diablo 4 always pet a dog in the game, in the city. They wouldn't follow you. They weren't your pet, but you could always pet them. But now you can actually have a pet. But that's really all they do, is that they serve the function of being a companion. But I think it kind of works in a game like that because it's meant to be, doesn't always succeed, but it's meant to be this very gritty, dirty, lonely world. And when you're in the cities, of course, the modern Diablo 4, it's not an MMO by any means, but you're in shared servers with other people, so you see them running around. It kind of breaks the immersion for me, but whatever. That's not my point. But you could always pet those dogs and stuff. So little things like that in some of those games, I think they work, but they could work better. And so I think if we're talking about how did it make it worse, no, it didn't make it worse, or maybe the pet design wasn't the best. People love them, so we know that they work, but I think they could have been done better.
Oh yeah, I think
Yeah,
there are
no, that makes
definitely
sense.
examples of the implementation not being what we hoped it would be, but I don't know if there are too many examples where the addition of a pet made the experience of the game worse. So in that example with Diablo 4, it's just another cosmetic in collecting in Diablo 4. And you get, weapon cosmetics so that you can make whatever weapon you're using always look like your favorite one.
Mm.
It's just another example of that. I don't know that the introduction of a new set of cosmetics would in any way make that game worse. And I think that's what we're trying to think of is
Yeah.
examples where adding a pet at all was the wrong decision.
It almost feels as though it's almost a freebie in game design is to put a pet in your game. It feels almost as though you almost can't go wrong, short of a genuine catastrophic error along the lines of its AI being problematic, um, or something like that. It almost feels as though you can't go wrong because the worst that we found is just sometimes it's only okay. Sometimes it's not that interesting, and sometimes it's really, really good.
Yeah, I think I mean, I feel like there have to be ways to really fuck it up,
Oh yeah,
but but I don't know that I've seen any. I just imagine, an example we've talked about aggro and Shadow of the Colossus. If you didn't like aggro at the point you're supposed to care about aggro dying, I feel like that's the only way you could really screw it up is to give me this kind of tragedy surrounding a character I didn't care about. That would have ruined it, I think, for me if it really felt like the developers were just bludgeoning me over the head with this emotion that I was supposed to feel that I didn't. That would have probably rubbed me the wrong way, but I haven't seen that. I feel like it's very easy to write a tragic pet.
yeah. I think it is because of the unconditional aspect. I think. I
Mhm.
think it's as simple as will love you. They will love your player character for you almost having done the bare minimum for doing not much more than keeping them alive, and they will love you. And then if you suddenly lose that figure, that pet, it'll tear you up.
Mhm.
I think if you manage to basically personify a pet in the game, as long as you don't break that fundamental rule of what a pet is and what we expect it to be, it's really hard to get it wrong. If you have a fantasy game or a sci-fi game, do you want your pet to be something grounded in our reality? Do you want dogs in your sci-fi world? Do you want dogs in your fantasy world? Or do you want dragons? Do you want space squid? Do you want that foundation in our reality, or do you want the developers to use their imagination and show us the different man's best friend of that world?
Oh boy, if it's an RPG for sure, you want them to have some character, and there has to be some kind of way to associate what you know. So it could be, like you said, a jellyfish or whatever, but if it acts like a dog, barks like a dog, walks around like a dog, I keep a leash on it, it's kind of cute in its own little way because I can't have a dog no more in the space world, but in this other world, I mean, I can have a bunch of jellyfish. So, I mean, it's kind of a neat concept, but you always have to associate these are the rules of what we know a pet to be. You can't just like, put an octopus on a leash and somehow make your player understand what's going on. You have to connect all these other dots. So
I I think if we're just talking about personal preference, I'd like to see more creative interpretations of what a pet could be. I mean, if you look at SpongeBob, his pet snail who puts a leash on, it meows. Like it is a weirdly cute pet. I would love to see more creative adaptations of what a pet is. And I feel like fantasy and sci-fi give you a lot of different directions to go and a lot of freedom to design a completely new version of a pet. And I appreciate that. But I think like we've said this whole time, you can't really go wrong with the classics. So like if you put a dog in a game, I'm probably going to be a big fan, even if it's the clumsy little robot dog in Mass Effect 3. Like, it's not a beloved character, but I appreciate that it's there.
I think for myself, I want to see that creativity, definitely. I will fall back if I have to on, okay, just give me a dog. But if we're in a sci-fi world, if everything else is going to be different and unique, I want to see something different and unique. And by this, I don't mean give me a dog and give it horns. Don't give me a dog with like an electric like nose or whatever. I want to really see you thinking outside the box, which is oddly enough what my one criticism of Mass Effect, particularly Andromeda, but the whole series is most of the aliens, with some exceptions, which is why the trilogy gets something of an exception from this. Most of them look like humans, roughly speaking. They're mostly just bipedal. They've got 2 arms. Their heads look like ours. Thankfully, you do have the Hanar, you've got the Volus, you've got the Elcor. But I want to see them really use their imagination. What if there's some planet out there where life, in its regular form, is gas-based, as opposed to solid, for example? I want that. I want things living inside a gas giant where they're kilometers, big miles, sorry everyone, where they're enormous, different scale to us entirely. I want those interesting life forms. I feel like a pet in those worlds might be an easy way to do that. Because you don't have to come up with all the combat animations. You haven't got to come up with how it interacts. What's its rules set? You could try really interesting things with the pets. Because all it needs to be is something that you can love. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So why not really play with the rule set at that moment? Right? Why not really try and make something different and unique?
I think you nailed it with the idea that pets give you that opportunity to experiment with non-humanoid life. Because I feel like I remember this watching through seasons of Star Trek, is that every alien race that main characters interact with in Star Trek is humanoid. Not just humanoid, but like as you progress, it kind of seems like they're all able to mate with each other, which is another kind of weird problem. They do actually address that in the series, but I feel like the fun is meeting stuff that is very, very different. And I think you've also kind of highlighted why pets give you more freedom. You don't have to build a culture for a pet. You don't have to build a philosophy or a way of thinking or priorities. You just need to make them kind of cute and a bit sweet, and you're good. Yeah, we're talking about you.
So this might be a slam dunk question, but just in a vacuum, gameplay better. Would you prefer a game that came out with a pet or not with a pet?
I used to not care. For the longest time, I was quite underwhelmed by pets in video games. I often thought of them in the same way that I would think of escort missions in games. It was just an extra thing I had to think about, an extra thing that was going to bother me, and I wasn't really a fan. The last 10 or so years, and I'm thinking of those really key examples, which was, for my development, it was D-Dog in Metal Gear Solid, it was the horse in Red Dead Redemption, and finally Torgal in Final Fantasy 16. I've realized how much a good pet can change, can enhance your love of a game. So it's not exactly a selling point for me if you tell me your game has a pet, but it really doesn't hurt. So I'd like to see more, and this is again our golden rule, I'd like to see more well done pets in video games.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think this example did come to me after that kind of discussion. The only game I can think of where like they added pets and then I was excited and then disappointed was House Flipper. Because in House Flipper, you can get pets, but they just kind of become a thing that exists, and they're not even really like your pet because they don't simulate that aspect of life. So it's kind of like they added a pet and it has no place in that world because you're flipping houses. And it was very cool to go through the pet expansion for House Flipper. I really enjoyed, I think, like the second mission, you clear out a train and 101 Dalmatians run past you, and then one stays behind and you adopt it. I think that's adorable.
Yeah.
But the fact that once you've adopted to that pet, you buy like an auto feeder and an auto fill water bowl, and you basically like put in the tools to have a pet, and then you leave the house and go flip another house. It's like the pet doesn't work because there's no way to integrate a pet into the gameplay. It doesn't hurt the game because I really enjoyed discovering my first pet, opening that cardboard box and pulling out the randomized puppy and lifting it up and just being like, oh, you're adorable, you're coming home with me. I loved that experience, but there was nothing beyond that. It was, look at this cute pet. Okay, now back to work.
I think that's the idea of it sort of serving a purpose is so important, because even if we think of something like, just imagine that we have a pet in Mass Effect or we have a pet in Dragon Age, and the pet is at camp or it's on board the Normandy. Its purpose is almost downtime for you. We've come away from this mission, we finally put the gun down, he's taken the armor off, we're settling into camp. And just the fact that there's a pet with whom you can do nothing but pet it, that's a mechanic right there. That's a moment for you. It's a moment of rest, just to get that out of your system. So it doesn't even need to have a gameplay mechanic in the sense of being combat-oriented or finding items for you, for it to have a role. It's just, it feels as though, from your description of it, the role of the pet in House Flipper is to make you sad that you're leaving your pet alone at home.
It does. You can bring them with you when you go to flip houses, but then they kind of get in your way.
And yeah, well, he hasn't got his blanket and stuff then as well. He hasn't got his corner.
No, it feels like the whole point is get your pet after you've sold all the houses and then just spend time with your pet.
The when you said the House Flipper, I was thinking like a simulator, and it, big spoiler here, Power Wash has all these cats everywhere, and there's actually a big lore thing with the cats, and it's specifically the mayor's cat. And it like, you'll go to like some house or whatever, and you always see these little paw prints everywhere. But if you're reading the little text and the little journals, whatever you get, you'll realize there's actually a running theme here with the lore, and it has to do with the pets of the community, the cats. It's just like a little thing, and it just kind of ties in the world of that immersion of the Power Wash world. I mean, all you're doing is power washing. They didn't have to add all these little stories, but specifically there's a lot of cats that are central to the theme of the Power Wash.
I can't remember if it's exactly what we addressed at the very start, so if it is, we can just cut this bit out. Did we just say simply what our favorite one is?
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Like, I feel like we have to answer that question. Each of us go around and say, what is our favorite video game pet? The problem is I don't have an answer right now.
Whoever yours is, your horse in Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't think I've ever played a game where you form a stronger bond over such a long time that feels quite as deep as that one does. And the fact that we said sort of the realism almost doesn't matter in terms of the graphics. But with that one, I feel it didn't matter, but it really enhanced. So I loved this horse to the 95% possible, and then it just pushed it up over the edge and really built an attachment with that horse. And the fact that the horse is so real, so interactable, the fact that the horse feels alive, it'll whinny, it'll shit, it'll walk around on its own for no reason if you don't tie it up. It'll come back when you call it. I remember one time riding through a field. I played that game for about 70 hours, and I didn't realize there were snakes in the game. I just never met one, just by chance. I'd never walked into one. Because they tend to flee, like in real life. Snakes don't like people, so they bugger off. And at one point, I was running, and my horse just went, kicked something, and there was this little X on the map. And I went back, and it was, rattlesnake skin or something. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for that new fear that's been unlocked. But that moment of the horse just lashing out on its own meant so much because it just defined it more as a character. It wasn't just that I bouldered through this. He kicked out and took out this snake. And any game that can make you feel like the animal is truly real, I think it's really done something magical. And I think they are the best example of a game that's done that to this day. So for me, my horse in Red Dead Redemption 2 is my favorite video game animal companion of all time.
You mean horsey?
Horsey. But again, no S.
For me, I'm going to actually, it's going to be a broader one, but I'm going to hopefully narrow it to make sense. But the animals in Baldur's Gate 3, because I can talk to them all. And they're all basically my pets now because I can talk to them.
Speak with pets or speak with animals spell in Baldur's Gate 3 is tremendous. I think they really put in the effort to make that a pleasant experience. And knowing that spell exists in the world of D&D and the pets that they have in Baldur's Gate 3, so well done.
Yeah, because you'll have like a bear who's sitting on the elevator, and you can, even if you don't have that spell, you can kind of like, nudge him and he's like, and then you can put the fish over there so he just follows the fish, but you don't know what's going on, so you can still get the mechanic. Or you can talk to him and say, hey, look, I need to use this elevator. All right, let me go over here. And then he plops down. But it's this, like I said, so because I can talk to every single animal, but being able to talk to the entire game worth of animals, that to me, I almost feel like they're all my pets now, leaving the spiders. Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, it would have to be, so there were two that came to mind, but one of them I feel like is a little too distant throughout the game, and that's Umbra from Final Fantasy 15. So Umbra is essentially your connection to your love interest in Final Fantasy 15. And they do a really good job with Umbra's role by associating them with this kind of beloved character. But you don't get a ton of interaction with Umbra beyond that. It's just they are the tool by which you communicate with your love interest. And they are a beautiful dog.
Yes.
So that was a game where the graphics really helped. But because of that kind of lack of continuous interaction with Umbra, I feel like they can't really be my favorite. So for me, it's Rush from Mega Man. Because Rush is cute despite being a robot and so tremendously useful throughout the multiple Mega Man games. I think there's Rush Jump or something where he becomes essentially a trampoline and launches you up to a higher Rush Coil. That's it. There's Rush Jet where he becomes a jet and allows you to fly around. He is the most versatile pet in any video game, and he's cute. So it helps.
That's a fantastic choice. That is a very, very good choice.
There's going to be some people in the comments that say, well, you forgot about Yoshi or whatever. So we didn't even go down that route. So
Yoshi's a tough one because I don't know if Yoshi's a pet.
Yeah.
Yoshi is a companion in the sense that, like, Tally is a companion.
I believe there is a game, isn't there, or where you actually play directly as Yoshi?
Yoshi's Story.
Yeah. And I think we had that, didn't we, as one of our loose guidelines, was generally if you played directly as them, then they didn't count.
Hmm. And there's...
But our rules normally get thrown to the side anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Honorable mention for me would be the dogs from Resident Evil, because they're evil and they don't pretend like they're not evil. They are who they are.
It's your real problem.
You've got to stop pretending that's an endearing quality. An honest piece of shit is still a piece of shit.
Yeah. For anyone unaware what Legion's talking about.
Yeah. But on that note, I guess we'll go ahead and call it. And unless you guys have an honorable mention of your own, but
I guess Umbro would have to be mine.
Yeah. And I think for mine, out of just pure interest, the pariah dog from Fallout 2.
Oh, Fallout 2. Interesting.
Yeah. The worst of all companions. Absolutely crippling for your gameplay. But a bold choice by the developers.
Well, I appreciate everybody's contributions today. And as if you may or may not know, we are on YouTube where we have this as a video. Any of the audio listeners. And for any who's watching only on video or on YouTube, we do have a bunch of podcast sources. We have Amazon, Apple Music, and Spotify. Check those out. Go ahead and give it a rating, give it a comment. But until next time, any closing ideas, remarks, anything at all?
I'd like it to be known that when we wave goodbye, I'm actually waving to Kiki.
Oh.
I have to face the camera, but I will be petting Kiki off camera.
Okay. And everybody wave to Kiki. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Kiki.